So when we look at the global scenarios, the ERP or the enterprise resource planning, this has been the technology which has been there, have been there in this industry for more than 2 to 3 decades, I would say. The ERP as a solution have been started from a process-centric approach. The process centric is predominantly people start adopting an ERP from their inventory management way back 30 years or 35 years back. That is the time like when people are looking at how do we automate some of those mundane process, especially the procurement process or maybe some sort of inventory, like how much the raw material which I bought a few months back, what is the current status of my raw material back in my backyard or in my inventory. To understand the current status of those informations, people started adopting some sort of a tool which basically talk about the material in, material out, and the material consumed and material left out. So that is the way the whole concept of ERP started evolving 30 years back. What it added up due to the growth of all this technology and IT have been playing a bigger role in terms of developing this ERP or an MRP into a full-fledged enterprise solution in the last, I would say in the last 2 decades or less than 2 decades. The involvement of IT have transformed the traditional MRP into a full-fledged business enterprise solution. So currently, the ERP run by many of those OEMs is not only touching about the traditional MRP or a sales and distribution or maybe an inventory management. Today, the ERP talks about much beyond that. It talks about business intelligence. It talks about in terms of like how do I ensure my customers' satisfaction is being monitored? How do I ensure my product deliveries to the customers in a limited time frame? So that way, the change of ERP had happened for the last 30 years in a much more elaborated way, I would say. But when it comes into the SMB space, the SMB or the medium scale industries started adopting an enterprise solution or something like an MRP type of solutions, probably at 20 years to 15 years back only. They have been relying on most of the time the bookkeeping records or maybe the spreadsheets of the world, or they are all like looking at a homegrown solution, which we call it as like some sort of an MRP system or MES system. So gone, like when 20 years back, when I was talking to some of those manufacturing companies, they used to have a department called MES, this Management Information System. What this MES does for that SMB company, so they do take care of each and everything, whatever happens inside the organization, whether it is a vendor payment or whether it is a material inward movement, or it may be a payroll to their employee, or in terms of the leave management system, or issuing a work order to the shop floor on the production planning or schedule. Everything happens out of a small, very conservative department called MES or the EDP department or MES department. That is where the entire SMB started adopting an IT into their organization. Over the last 15-20 years, this MES and EDP department have moved into a slightly sophisticated, which we call it as the IT department or the probably like the information systems department. So that is the way the people started adopting this one. But having said that, but still the SMBs are all very focused on very niche areas in terms of the ERP or MRP requirements. They are all looking at MRP, ERP currently from the material management and inventory management, and probably some of the other areas of the human resources management. And then financial balance statement for the organizations to understand what is the P&L happening for the company. So these are the areas predominantly the SMB have been start adopting an ERP type software and solutions. Is it good enough for those companies to look at? Majority of the time, these informations are all mostly like a static information. When it make sure that for them, the manufacturing where the actual product is getting manufactured, that is not being addressed by any, whether it is an OEM or a small and medium-sized organization, they have not been focusing on that particular element of the nature. The manufacturing related ERP activities, the manufacturing oriented data transaction activities, nobody have been thought about it. But the adoption of the ERP from the SMB standpoint have been growing up, and that is the reason many of those big corporate companies, they have been started coming out with some sort of a cloud-based services, SaaS-based services to ensure the SMB also start adopting the ERP solutions and everything. When we look at the cloud and the SaaS-based applications, it obviously eliminates the need of heavy investment in terms of the infrastructure, the high-end servers, all the stuff is not needed. So that is why one set of technology providers is moving towards a SaaS model and a cloud-based model to enable the SMB to adopt these technologies. The other school of thought is I am working in a very, very remote location where my connectivity and network is an issue. So those SMBs also there in our country. So to address them, we also need to look at an on-premises, very low cost, total cost of ownership type of a solution. So in that context, it needs to be well balanced by technology service provider like Dassault system. We need to look at both ends of the pyramid. If you are focusing only at the top end of the pyramid, it will not help us to address the entire Indian manufacturing sector. So that is why we do have a different type of a strategy when we look at SMB to adopt a ERP or an MRP type solution. So that is the fundamental reason to bring in a solution like DELMIAworks, which is basically have the both ends. It also provides a flexibility of doing a cloud-based hosted services activity, as well as it can also provide on-premises activity at a lowest total cost of ownership. So that is the reason we look at SMB is going to be the pivotal for the growth of India as well as for the company. When we look at the SMB alone, the maturity level within the SMB, as we have been talking about, it is not to that level how the OEMs have adopted these type of technologies. There are multiple reasons, multiple pivots for that, why the SMBs have not adopted. As we have been talking about, it is predominantly it is the owner centric. The SMB is owner centric. If the owner is a technocrat, if he as an individual he is a very knowledgeable technocrat, he always look at automating some of his mundane process and then moving into a much more higher value chain by adopting technology. If it is a family-owned business, and then if the next generation is coming into taking up the reins of the predecessor, then what happens is there also we see adoption of these type of technology tools and technology solutions happening. But the third category is basically the business owners are all purely from a trade background, not from a technology background. They are not technocrats. There the challenges is basically the onus lies on a technology provider like Dassault Systems. So we need to give them the clear-cut business benefit as well as the technology benefit. So the third category is the people we are now having in majority in India. So we as a ownership lies on a technology providers like Dassault Systems to ensure what is the benefit the owners is going to get, or the business owners or the small time business owner is going to achieve out of it. So it is basically the technology provider, the industry, as well as some of those government-led initiatives should help the SMBs to look at how they can leverage these IT technologies for their benefit. This is from my standpoint of it.
No, that's
Sai, yeah.
Yeah. So good. You covered a very large ground in terms of what is the status of SMB globally as well as in India. It brings to my next question. How does DELMIAworks help manufacturers to optimize resource and make manufacturing greener?
Yeah. So what the ideology behind the DELMIAworks to bring it to the manufacturing world is to ensure it is not to cut the jobs, not to cut the automation. It is basically we need to automate some of the tasks. Automating the task is a need of the hour, not to cut down the jobs. So when we are talking about automation of the task, if you take any manufacturing operations, there will be multiple tasks involved in the manufacturing of a final product. DELMIAworks type of a solution will help the organization, especially the district manufacturing organization, to automate these tasks so that it will help the organizations to see where exactly my product manufacturing cycle is all about. Whether am I doing as per my schedules, or is there any delay in my overall planning and scheduling, so that if I give a committed date for a delivery to my customer, am I able to achieve this committed date and delivery? That is fundamental for the customer satisfaction. That is needed for the repeat order from the same customer. If not able to do the proper delivery as per the timelines, we will not be able to retain the customer. So that is the fundamental thing when we look at automating the task. And DELMIAworks type of solutions will help the manufacturing organization to automate these tasks and then give a more visibility and clear-cut status of the manufacturing process at any point in time during the manufacturing process. So when we talk about this, there is also another factor like, okay, how do we ensure that people who are associated in the manufacturing process is being doing as per the timelines? Because many countries have some of those strict labor laws, and we need to follow those labor law guidelines to ensure that there is a proper rest hours have been given for the job workers or the manufacturing people, and we need to manage their time and attendance. So majority of the time, like people do work more than 8 hours, 12 hours in the shop floor, the same person. To avoid all those fatigue, we can also do the proper time and attendance to ensure like, okay, with the required optimal resources, how do we ensure we get the maximum productivity? So that is also one of the main key functional area which DELMIAworks address. The third aspect which we normally look at into is like, in many of the manufacturing organizations, they do have variety of machines. The machines may be some sort of a numerically controlled machines where it's all smart machines. We need to understand like when an operation happens on a machine, so where exactly the problem is happening. It is because of my machine parameters. As I told like earlier also, there is an example I will talk about, an aerospace contract manufacturing company you take. The aerospace contract manufacturing company who makes a lot of this machining of all the raw materials and then make it to the final produced product. The machining centers or the milling machines which needs to work to cut the metal to final product needs to have some of the basic parameters to give the maximum output. One of the major criteria is the spindle RPM speed. If the spindle RPM speed varies and then the coolant temperature which is going to cool the entire cutting process, if this is going to have a variation, it has an impact on the overall productivity. So how do we currently manage this? Currently, people, a worker or a job machine people who needs to sit before the machine or stand before the machine to monitor it on a continuous basis, to understand whether my coolant temperature, the spindle RPMs are all correctly performing as per the requirement. We do convert these milling machines into a smart machine with all the sensors based approach, so that this gives a periodical information on a timely manner back into the DELMIAworks machining center data server, and then gives information like, okay, the coolant temperature is going up by 2%, 5%, it gives alert. In that way, we can ensure like this is not going to be a productive output from this machine. Imagine a huge manufacturing setup having thousands and hundreds of machines like this. It is impossible in the human perspective to monitor and maintain all these machines. A real-time monitoring solution from DELMIAworks will help them to automate these type of tasks. So that is the difference we can bring it to our manufacturing customers to ensure like, especially the third shift or a C shift we normally call it in the manufacturing world. The third shift is a place where the lowest productivity happens because of various parameters. By providing a DELMIAworks real-time monitoring solutions, this entire process these tasks can be automated, which will yield a higher productivity. This is where the major difference, small-time manufacturers to a larger manufacturers will gain benefit by using the real-time monitoring and real-time production for monitoring purposes. The DELMIAworks as a solution provide these end-to-end solutions for the manufacturing sector. From an Indian context perspective, India is having a widespread industry sectors across the various tier 2, tier 1 cities of this country. So when we look at some of those key spot areas of the industry verticals, so we go one step beyond this in terms of their manufacturing processes. So when you look at the manufacturing processes, we have the metal injection and the plastic injection molding process. That's basically a very, very big market where the real-time monitoring is very, very needed for many of the manufacturers. So the plastic injection molding manufacturing process is one particular manufacturing process. This is going to have a bigger impact. And then the second one is basically on your metal cutting, the machining process. This is another area. The third area is the assembly, wherein like majority of the lot more automotive or the auto component manufacturers, they follow this assembly process where like they source multiple level of parts from multiple suppliers. They bring it up all the items into one place in their assembly shop floor, and then they will tag it with RFIDs and then the barcodes, and then they try to do the complete assembly process. So in that way also we can ensure like how do we ensure the assemblies happens in the right time at the right place. So that is also another way of doing the manufacturing process. Then the stamping process. So there are a lot of part and products for various industries. It goes as a stamping process. We have a lot of stamping machines. How do we ensure the stamping machines are all working at an overall equipment effectiveness, which we can do that. So when we look at all these manufacturing processes, it can go into the industries like the automotive, especially the automotive industries. The second one is the aerospace contract manufacturing areas. The third is on the life sciences, which basically we talk about the medtech devices. So post-pandemic, the requirement of the majority of the lab equipments, and then especially the PPE kits, as well as some of those swab testing equipments, some of the swabs. We have many customers who have come out with these swabs. Swabs are all made of these plastics, and these plastics are all come out in bulks. It's all like everyday people are manufacturing in lakhs for the testing purposes. So there is a huge requirement have happened for especially for the plastic manufacturers to produce this one. But at the same time, we need to manufacture these swabs, plastic swabs, with the utmost precision, so that it should not go and hurt the particular patient's nose or the nasal side. So we need to ensure that it has a proper qualitatively output product needs to come out. For that, the injection molding machines or the plastic molding machines needs to be monitored on a real-time basis. So this is another area which have given an impetus growth in the last 1.5 years, especially from the post-pandemic and the pandemic crisis. The other industry factor which we definitely look at is the food and beverages and the packaging industries, where it is like most of the things are all automated, the tasks are all automated. So this is another industry. It's a sweet spot industry for the DELMIAworks, and people can adopt it much more faster. So these are the industries which we are now looking at from the Indian context to look at helping our manufacturing customers.
Great. We got a very good understanding of these sectors which can benefit, and also how organizations need to adopt this. So that's very much. One of the decisive factors for MES consideration is the ease and efficiency with which the software can be implemented, and also the kind of training the organization. Because if you don't have a motivated team, you can't get the best out of the implementation. And many times the blame is on the solution then, not on the.
Yeah.
So how do you rank on customer satisfaction on implementation?
Okay. So actually, if you ask me openly and tell about openly, this has been a 40-year-old information and 40-year-old technology, wherein like we talked about this technology for the 40 years, and then in the 40 years we captured many customers across the globe, and none of these customers have stopped paying their maintenance itself, because everybody is on their current maintenance. So that gives a clear-cut confidence to many of our prospecting customers, stating that our solution is adding a lot of business benefit and value benefit to them. So that's why like every year they pay the AMC contract with us on a continuous basis. So So none of our customers have gone out of this AMC in the last 40 years of this IQMS existence, and then now it is managed by Dassault systems from that perspective. So that is the one testimony. The second testimony I could talk about, like, we hate customization, but typically when we implement enterprise solutions, when we try to cut corners and then try to modify the entire architecture to different level, and it becomes like completely a different animal. And then when we implement it, the return on investment as well as the realization benefit, many customers would like to see it in within less than a year. It gets a longer period. So for that, the main reason is, like, with a consultant, we try to do a lot of this customization. It creates a problem in most of these enterprise applications. But in DELMIAworks, we ensure, like, we provide most of the functions and features needed for the different types of manufacturing process as an out-of-the-box function, which means it's purely a configuration. If it is a metal cutting process, we have a set of functions and calls, routines. We can configure it immediately. If it is an assembly manufacturing process, in terms of like stage-wise assembly process, it's a purely configuration which we can do that. So that way, we provide 95% of the functionality as an out-of-the-box function, which will enable the customers to see the results much more faster in terms of the implementation and services. So when we talk about the knowledge and the skill sets needed to implement these type of solution, typically as a technology service providers, we don't hire the actual IT guys to do this type of implementation, because this is more from a domain expertise needed. So most of our industry consultants who does these implementations, who provide the value added services in terms of the implementations, they're all from the industry people. So they know their manufacturing processes. So instead of having the IT people to hard code the software, we rely on the functional consultant who have the domain expertise, so that we know the exact pain points for the manufacturing industry, so that we provide it in a most out-of-the-box functionality, so which will help the organizations to do that. So how do we address that? Through our professionally service organization. We do have the professional services organization who does this implementation. As I said, these are all more from an industry domain people, not from an IT background people, where we don't do much of this coding work. So this is the biggest advantage or the differentiation. We would like to put it to our customers, stating that we hate customization. Your return on investments and realizations can happen much faster. So that is the way we look at, like, do that. And to ensure, like, we provide the necessary skill sets and certifications, we do have the structured certification programs. When a customer buys and invests on our solution, so we do have created a different types of project timelines for the adoption as well as the implementation of our solution. So during the adoption,